welcome back to another fabulous chat with my good friend Michael Tellinger in South Africa. So you know the drill. Here we go.
Always great to speak to you, John Paul. Where did we leave off last time? Where are we going to kick off this time? What do you think?
I think we kind of promised that we would go into the giants, but I was looking at some of the giant stuff and my attention really was drawn to all the healing stuff. I think that it would be interesting to talk about what we've learned about vibration and frequency and tone and sound and sunlight and all the healing work that's happened in the circles. I thought that would be...
Okay. So instead of the giants, we're going to talk about healing. And I know the healing is really important for a lot of people. So I think it's cool. We'll get to the giants when we get out of the healing stuff, because we'll probably be stuck for more than one episode. So let's get going. Just to warn those that are tuning into this episode, I'm visiting my mother out in the country in a retirement village, and I'm on the balcony outside. I've decided to do this outside al fresco because there's not enough light in the house. And it's it feels like midsummer's day. It's about 30 degrees out here. So if you hear birds chirping in the background, yes, you are hearing birds. It's not synthetic. It's real live birds, African birds, chirping away in the background.
Yes, and you'll hear nothing in my world. I'm in a scarf and a jumper. It was only about 15 degrees here today.
Anyway. Isn't it bizarre? We're both in the southern hemisphere. I guess Melbourne is probably quite a bit more south than I am here in Rustenburg, South Africa. So you probably so it probably gets quite a bit colder in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. Anyway, okay, 15 degrees from John Paul's location to 30 degrees where I am, possibly a bit more. Where do we kick off? You want to talk about the healing. So maybe I'll preface this by saying one of the things that we discovered many years ago already is going into the stone circles. I've had basically a string of repetitive stories of people telling me that they've experienced some form of healing. So at first I thought, it's just coincidence. And then by the time that you hear the 20th person tell you that they've experienced some sort of healing going into the stone circles, whether they're either on a tour with me or if they get dropped off there and we leave them alone. By the time we get to person number 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, and I'm not making this up, I'm talking about 200 people and more that have shared their experiences about experiencing what they call miraculous healing. You start thinking, okay, this is no longer a coincidence. This is a repetitive thing happening. And that's really what research is. If you can repeat an experiment over and over again and get the same results, then you've got a very serious scientific experiment. So that's really what we have over a period of 12 years, since 2008 till 2020, where we sit here right now. We've had hundreds of people come through the stone circles and report experiencing a variety of healing. The most severe one was from Vermont, USA. They got cured of full-blown cancer. And that's really what we're talking about. I'm going to hand it over to John Paul to tell us his perspective and how he wants to approach the subject.
Well, I think the place to start is, again, going back to the vision quest that I did, spending 3 days and nights on the top of that hill where there's the 2 conjoined circles. So that place that we call the welcome circle. So when you stand there, the circle that is on your left, which would be the southernmost circle, was explained to me by the Anunnaki spirits who showed up to the vision quest and answered questions, was where they were doing modifications of plant DNA. And then the circle on the north was where they were doing DNA and modifications for humans. So what they explained, that each of these circles that are within the large circle was like a distinct lab. And they were tuned to particular frequencies. So, I don't remember what year it was, but I went up to one of those small circles and I went around and I recorded the tones that I hit. When I hit the stones, they rang, and I recorded them. And there were 61 samples, audio samples. Sent those off to a composer friend of mine who scanned them, whatever the equivalent of that is in music, put those into a recording and found out that of the the 61 tones, the dominant frequency was 147 hertz. And that all of the tones that were in that circle were in the key of B flat major. So I remember when we first learned that, we're like, okay, something's going on. That's pretty wild that it's that. So when the Anunnaki spirits showed up, I said, well, I know that that particular circle is of interest to me because I know that it has a particular pitch when you hit the stones. The common pitch is 147 hertz. So can you show me more about that circle? So across the 3 days, they they showed me various circles. So in that circle, they wanted to talk about sort of 4 principles of the work that they did as genetic engineers, genetic scientists. So they showed me that particular circle, and they said, well, this circle is where we do the finishing work. So they explained that the frequency of 147 hertz will set the experiment. So they gave me the analogy. They said, sorry, I have notes on another monitor. They said, think of it like the final developing fluid in a photo lab, the setting fluid. So once we've done the modification that we need to do, we suspend whatever it is we're working on in a water bath with this frequency and this sunlight for a duration of days to set it. So it's like the finishing, so that whatever we've done holds. And they said, understand that a lot of the work we did was very minute, was very small, was very delicate. And it was easy, if you didn't put it in this bath to have it set, it could fragment, it could split apart. So I said, all right. So I looked at this and they explained this. And I said, well, is there a way that we can use this? And they said, well, sure. If you went into that circle and you heard that frequency and you had lots of water, so either in a bath or you drank the water, the sunlight, the water, and the frequency are the magic recipe. Sunlight, water, frequency. And that if you had gone through surgery and you needed that to set, if you'd had a broken bone that was in a cast and you needed it to set, if you'd gone through some incredible healing experience, a psychology session, and you were letting go of something, or if you'd made a change, if you'd done something to rewire parts of your brain, if you wanted whatever it was to set, that's the circle and the frequency. And then they went on and showed me other circles.
So before you carry on, when you first told me this, what struck me as a very obvious coincidence is that 147 is one of the key numbers that you find, one of the fractal numbers that you find in toroidal field or vortex maths, as it's called these days, vortex maths. And there are these several numbers that keep reoccurring, and I guess you can see them as fractals of the numeric system and frequencies and fractals of numbers that make up the numeric sequences that create torsion fields or toroidal fields, or the donut shape of energy as it's formed in our density, our reality, not just here, but throughout all of creation around us in space as well. And keep in mind that every sound you make manifests in a toroidal field. So the first thing that we see in manifestation, when God said, let there be light, it's that sound of creation, the sound of the creator that creates the light is actually a toroidal field where you've got the sound and the light that combine together, and then the combination of the sound and the light then seems to manifest the physical form that we experience in this density. So that is not a coincidence, and that's really interesting. So the fact that at 147 was the frequency at which they set things so they become stable in this density and this world of ours, that is really crucial. And I didn't think we were going to talk about this, so I didn't bring with me or prepare text numbers and so forth, which I will do for the next chat, so that people get this. And I will then do a separate lecture on vortex maths and toroidal field mathematics, which is really critical to understand the very simple concept or the science and the physics behind creation, behind manifesting something physical out of sound, resonance, and then light. And that is just spectacular. So in so many ways, when you look at ancient texts, obviously including the Bible and so many other ancient texts, the knowledge and the wisdom that is encoded in these texts is beyond our wildest dreams They are literally telling us what's going on. They're literally telling us how things work, how the nature of reality around us works. And the fact that you picked it up in the frequencies of the stone circle walls and the stones in those walls is unbelievable. So that is a very critical discovery, a major breakthrough into more supportive evidence how powerful these stone circles are, how flexible they are, or how varied their uses are. My brain is a bit stalled for vocabulary today for some reason, and how widely their uses can be they can be used, and this is just spectacular. So I need to remember to come back to this and do this research. But as you know, there's so much stuff to research. It literally, we would need a lot of funding to be able to free ourselves from the daily grind to just go on and do all this incredible research, which I guess in many ways will benefit humanity in so many ways, especially in the field of healing. Yes. But so clearly we know that the stone circles heal people, they create incredible healing, but you take it further and share with us what else you've
well, I think, making that leap to the toroidal field, then I look at the geometry of the fact that we're dealing with stone circles. So you've got a circle already. So it makes perfect sense that what I'm seeing, so everyone always wants to know, so what did it look like? So what it looked like was a column around the circle. And the column had kind of a membrane. And this is the crudest analogy, but it is kind of what it looked like. It was like a huge giant condom, some kind of thing that had liquid in it. And it was clear, so I'm assuming it was mostly water, but they explained that there were different kinds of water. They would alter the atomic weight of the water. So the water had different viscosities and different atomic weights. So that's what's hanging.
And that's nothing new, by the way. You know that the scientists today, the guys that work with water, the water scientists, and that is, guys that won Nobel Prizes for their research and their discoveries in the mystery of water and the different phases of water. As in H2O, you get H3O2 and so forth. So there are various phases of water and various ways that water molecules can interact to each other and create different types of water. It remains water, but it's just different what they phase of water. And then also, obviously, what's very important is the not just the structure of water, but then the whole thing of the memory of water and the incredible nature of water. Once you start researching water, you realize that water is most likely the highest level of consciousness in all of creation. And it could be that water could be called the Holy Spirit, or water could be called the Matrix, or water could be called, when you really get into it, it is unbelievable. The physical manifestation of divine energy. That's what water is.
Well, the number of shamanic rituals that involve water, it's ridiculous. I mean, yes, in the shamanic sense, you pull together the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water, but, all the naming ceremonies happen in water. In lots of organized religions, baptism in water, it is water. It's about the water. Anyway.
And for people that are new to this, just keep in mind that what I'm saying here is not just something that I feel, this is, I think this is, and I feel this might be. No, this is the study of water, the incredible mysteries and unique properties of water are truly mind-blowing. I don't think we even scratched the surface of our beginning to understand what water really is. And if you the fact that water has infinite memory, just think about this statement. This is not a statement. This is a statement not to be taken lightly. Water has infinite memory. This is something spectacular. So, we struggle with memory in the crystals and the crystalline chips and things they use in our computers and our phones. We always run out of memory. There's never enough memory in this and that. Well, there's enough memory in 1 cubic meter of water to probably sustain all the information in the known universe. And this is spectacular information. And once one realizes the fractal nature of this, the structure of water, the way that water can fold in and be structured in so many different ways, you start to realize how we're now suddenly knocking on the door of realizing the importance of water in all of creation and the fact that water has infinite memory. Let me just throw a little hint there, because we're going to come back to this at some stage. The fact that space is full of water. Okay, this is new information for you. Hold on to your hat, because we're going to blow your mind here when we start talking about space and the water in space, and what the average person on the street has no idea about, the fact that space is not empty. Space is full of water. And I'll come back to this at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah, we should really create some kind of a choose your own adventure chat where people could go off onto any rabbit hole that they would like in our discussion. It's too hard to force people to go down a linear path.
Yeah, no, you can't go down a linear path, because you say something like, oh, yeah, off the main track. Yeah. So let's come back to circles.
So there we are.
Healing, and you can, yeah.
Right. So I'm back on the top, and my Anunnaki spirits are taking me on the tour of what's going on here. So they showed me 4 different labs. So there was the finishing lab, where they were modifying plants. And they said, we're doing 2 things. We're modifying the plants so that we can eat them, but we're also modifying some of our plants so that they will grow here. So this was the finishing bath, where once they had modified them, and they were mostly seeds. There was a couple that looked like little sprouts, but mostly what they were just groupings of seeds. And they were also at different levels in the water. Some were quite low in the water, and I don't know how they just were suspended at whatever level in the water that they were, but that's just the way it was. So then they said, all right, so another lab to show you is a lab that this particular lab was for when you needed something to have it, all of it separated. So for the DNA to completely separate, but not dissolve. They said we just needed it to just expand away, so we could get and manipulate the pieces that we needed. So they would put objects in this particular bath, and that frequency, again, the particular sound frequency, the sunlight and the water, whatever weight that water was, would take whatever it was and divide the cells. It would divide the DNA within the cells, but it would just split everything open so they could begin an experiment. So this is kind of the place where we started. As we put it in there, we would not split it. It's not fair to say, because there was nothing aggressive. It was just that it would loosen, all the bonds would loosen, and all the pieces would just hold apart. That's how they explained it.
Well, people that understand the DNA molecule, or the DNA strand, is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's 2 strands of DNA. So, and the 2 strands come together, and the one is from the mother and the one is from the father, and they come and they combine and they create the new being. And this is how a fertilized egg gets fertilized, by getting the DNA from the one donor and from the other donor, the X and the Y chromosomes. And so this is how you create the new DNA strand. So to separate the DNA, any molecular biologist that works in molecular engineering and molecular splicing, that's what they do. They split the DNA so that they can work genes. And a gene is a number of base pairs. It could be from 4 base pairs to 10,000 base pairs to 100,000 base pairs altogether. The cytosine, adenine, guanine, and adenine, those base pairs in the DNA. There's just four base pairs that make up the entire complexity of our DNA structure. So by separating them, we know this today. So these guys obviously knew this hundreds of thousands of years ago. So this is why we've because it's in our DNA, it's in our genetic memory. So we've relearned this, what they were doing hundreds of thousands of years ago. So this is not new. We know this today, but they were doing it there, experimenting with the plant DNA and the animal DNA. Carry on. I love the story.
Yeah. So then the next one was a lab that water was the holding. So they said, we would be working on lots of different experiments, lots of different things at the same time. So sometimes, and they didn't have a huge staff. So one particular genetic engineer might be working on a whole bunch of projects. And at a certain point, they might need to just suspend one. So you could put it in this particular bath and it would suspend, it would just hold it exactly where it was. And they said, you don't have anything like that, but it's kind of like your concept of freezing something. And they said, so, but what this would, whatever it was, in whatever stage it was, you could just plunk it in there and it would just hold. It would just, nothing would happen to it. It would just stay there for as long as you needed it to stay. So then that brought up a question. I said, well, how long would it take to do these experiments? They said, well, pick the experiment. If you're talking about the finishing lab, that was about 5 of your days. And I remember I said, oh, like a week. And they said, no, 5 of your days. Okay. So, then we had a whole nother discussion about time and what time is for them versus what time is for us. That's another story. But the holding one was the one that could stay for as long as it needed to. Wouldn't matter. The separation one worked very quickly. And they said that was, to have things separate, that was almost instantly. You would put it in there and it would come apart and then you could, so that was quick. The finishing was 5 days and holding could be however long you wanted. And then the last one they said was like a, what did they call it? To increase the energy of the experiment. They said, like what you would understand of putting something in a vitamin bath or putting it in a nutrient-rich environment. They said what we would want to do a lot of times was to accelerate the growth of, we've done something, now we want to see what's going to happen. So we would accelerate the growth by putting it in this nutrient-rich environment and see how it would accelerate before we decided that it was good and we were going to try to bring it back and put it onto the earth. Because that was a very slow process. So we could do this to kind of speed it up and see what it was going to do. So those are the 4 labs that they showed me. So I said, well, are there other labs? And they said, well, what you've got in front of you now are the way we left it. They said, we could change these labs at any point. If we needed a lab to do something else, we would change the frequency of the stones and it would be whatever we wanted. And I said, well, what do you mean whatever we wanted? So they had a circle that hadn't been structured yet to be anything. So they took me to one of these circles and it didn't have the water tube condom-y thing in it at all. It was just the stones. And they said, well, we don't need that lab active yet. But when we do, what we do is we take the actual pitch of the stones combined with our intention and we program that lab. So they said, if whatever it is we want to do, let's say we want to do accelerated growth. So we want to actually multiply the amount of growth. We don't want it just to naturally occur like the nutrient-rich one. We want to really accelerate something. If we wanted to do that, we would have our intention of what that needs to be like, plus that particular frequency. So we would marry that frequency with our intention. So I wasn't really clear on whether they can use any frequency and make it do what they want, or if there were particular frequencies that worked for particular things. I'm still not clear on that alignment. Sorry,
while you were talking, I was, you were taking my mind in so many directions, and I just lost my train of thought where I wanted to take this. But it's really important for everyone to recognize the importance of frequency in this. It always comes back to the frequency, to the sound, resonance, and frequency. And the key thing here is that understand that sound is the primordial source of everything. Sound, resonance, and frequency, which then manifests as sound, as we hear it as sound. And the fact that sound turns into, because sound moves all the time, it's very difficult to keep sound and resonance static, to create a standing wave of sound. So, but even if it's a standing wave, it's still moving. It just appears to be a standing wave, because we talk about sound as a wave, right? So it's actually a toroidal field. It's not a wave, but this is how we've been taught this at university and at school. They put a wave on a whiteboard, say this is a sound wave, and that is so far from reality and what's really going on. It's almost ludicrous that we actually teach it like that. And maybe because the way we teach about sound and resonance and frequency in waves and not into toroidal structure that it is, that's what has prevented us from actually going deep students of sound and resonance and frequency, understanding the deeper aspects and how we could use it on a multidimensional level. Because when you get to the center of the sound and the toroidal fields that are manifested by the primordial source of sound and the resonance that create these toroidal fields, at the center of those toroidal fields, you get that what's referred to as the infinite density of the vacuum, or the 0 point, where all the energy comes from. Otherwise, where would these sounds and these frequencies come from? So they come from the source of creation. So somewhere, someone, something, some consciousness creates the primordial resonance. And that, by the way, that is exactly how the creation story in Buddhism goes. It's incredible, you know, where it says Vishnu slept undisturbed, without sound or motion. From the depths, a deep rumbling began to rumble. I can't remember the exact
Stir, yeah.
Stir, and it grew loud. It grew louder and louder. Vishnu awoke, and the night was gone, or something like that. So it's exactly the same, you know. Sound creates light. God said, "Let there be light." It's just a dramatic version of the biblical story. And once we become aware and acquainted with the creation and the manifestation of physical form through sound, resonance, toroidal fields, and then add the light aspect to it, that is incredible. And where does the light aspect come from? Keep in mind that when that sound begins to move, and when that moving sound creates magnetic fields, those moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields, and light is an electromagnetic phenomenon. So it's the primordial source of sound that gives rise to light. Now it all depends what frequency that sound is, what frequency the light is going to be. It's for that reason that we must count ourselves very, very lucky that we can't hear the frequencies we see with our eyes, and we can't see the frequencies we hear with our ears. The two are. Otherwise, we would go bloody crazy.
Yeah.
And yet, there are people that have the ability to see sound and to hear light. There are people that have developed those very special, unique attributes. And therein lies very important element of our evolutionary process, that we're evolving into conscious spiritual beings of higher consciousness, united in unity and connected to everything in creation, at which point I believe we'll be able to hear what we see and see what we hear, and be able to read each other's minds and communicate telepathically, and all these things that at one stage I believe we had the capacity to do. Point, we could be like them. So let us go down and destroy their language, because if they can do this, they can become like us.
Yep.
And I believe it was a very important moment in human history, the Tower of Babel, right?
Yep.
Where God or the gods realized that humanity was growing in consciousness, and they were growing in these incredible abilities and skills. And they realized that if they didn't basically prevent people from practicing telepathy and other amazing abilities that people are evolving into very quickly. And I don't know why I brought this up, but we're talking about sound. The reason I brought it up, so the fact that we know and we can explain how you can manifest something out of sound, that means sound can be used as a tool, a weapon, a healing tool. Sound can be used for everything and anything imaginable. So, and this is why it was used, the frequencies and the resonance were used for the genetic experiments in the genetic labs. And this is why Royal Raymond Rife did all the cures and the healing with sound frequencies and resonance and all that. So everything suddenly starts to make sense. And the fact that John Paul was able to connect with these beings, and the Anunnaki in this case, at the stone circles, and they explained to him how they were handling all this, is just fantastic. So we get a real first-hand experience of what they were doing. So I hope I didn't take you too far off.
No. So in my own practice, in the healing work that I do in shamanic healing, I've started to almost exclusively use sound. I mean, you know, we'll still do, soul retrieval is a whole other game, but particularly it's been sound. And, you know, I keep adding more and more tuning forks to my list. But they said to me, sorry, it needs a bit more explanation. When I was asking about what we could do with these, they said, well, look, you can take these ringing stones and create your own healing space, which we did on just this last tour that you and I did. So they said, look, go get 12 stones, put them in an oval pattern. They don't all have to be ringing stones, because the ringing stones connect the vibration with above, and the non-ringing stones, is that right? Do I have it the right way? Right. The non-ringing stones ground the energy into the earth. The ringing stones marry with above.
That would make perfect sense to me, because the non-ringing stones would be part of the bedrock. The ringing stones, so the bedrock vibrating the frequency of the earth, and then the ringing stones are picking up frequencies from above and ringing independently of the earth. So they create in combination from above and from below. Yeah.
Yeah. So they said, if you took 12 long stones and you created an oval and you used crushed milk quartz, which means that the vibrations have no gaps because it passes between the quartz and the hornfels stones, that was about 8 inches high, you could create a healing chamber that would slow the body down. And then you could make whatever changes you wanted to make in a healing sense. So that just the 12 stones would slow everything down enough that healing could take place. So then they said that if you were to use the body tuners that I have, they said you would have a 100% absorption rate, as opposed to now, without the support of the stones, you're getting an adjustment of between 30 and 40%.
What else do you recall from that session up on the welcome circle? Because there was a lot of activity there, because that's where you did your 3-day vision quest. You saw the one circle where they were explaining to you how they were developing the plant genetics. Did they show you any of the plants that you can refer to, that you can go back and explain what some of them looked like? And then what was the other stone circle all about?
Yep. So they did. They showed me some of the plants, and there was a circle. You'll have to help me with directions. I think it's further to the east, where they had as a nursery, and they would grow the plants and make sure that the plants connected. So we visited that circle, and that was just a circle there that was the only purpose of that was to try to seed the plants there, to grow the plants there, make sure everything was fine. So that was their little testing nursery. But there were 2 other really interesting circles. There was a little bit further to the south and east. There was a very peculiar small circle attached to this big circle, and it had a double wall around it. So much smaller, but it was peculiar in that it was the only one in the area with a double wall. So when, sometimes they led the discussion, sometimes I could ask questions, and I said, what's that circle? And they said, oh, well, that's the dangerous chemical circle. That when they were modifying...
That's really interesting. The moment you say double wall, it means more energy, more danger. So the double automatically goes hand in hand with more protection.
Yep.
It's like radiation. It's like to prevent the frequencies and the radiation from exiting the stone circle. It's amazing. And it's you know how many years it took me to figure out why some of the walls are thicker and why some of the walls are double walls and why some are not. And again, it's just part of the process of learning. Of the more information you get, the more pieces of the puzzle you put in, the more clearer the picture becomes. And the double walls are often associated with the magnetrons. The magnetron, the perfect flower stone circles that we're going to talk about in much more detail as well. All of those have double walls, have thick double walls, especially the channels that lead away from those magnetrons. So far, the ones that we visited have very thick double walls. And when I first discovered that one magnetron that we've done a lot of work at, it boggled my mind. Why is this one different? Why is this stone structure different from all the others? Why are these walls so thick here? So when I say thick, I mean wide. They're not necessarily high, but they're wide and thick. And then that channel runs into the bigger channel that goes and connects to all the other stone circles. So the fact that you mentioned that the walls are thicker because of the energy or chemicals or danger in that attachment of that one area of the stone circle is fantastic. And isn't that where we felt some really powerful energies? I mean, some people got in there and they literally started to freak out. They felt like they were going to pass out.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to jump. You still have to jump down into that one. That's quite. Yeah. It's quite well constructed. It's not. You can't just walk into that one. You have to jump. You have to get on the ledge and jump down in. So yeah, I can't remember who jumped in, and they jumped right back out. The other drone pilot guy.
In fact, you know what? Can I tell you? When we first started to measure the electromagnetic fields and the heat signature, the sound frequencies, electromagnetic fields, and the heat signature, that double-walled stone circle was the one that came up with all the red flags, like the electromagnetic measurements coming out of that little one were twice as much as the main stone circle that it's attached to. The heat signature in the heat signature is the average frequency going down, or the temperature. What's it? The temperature, average temperature going about 300 meters below. And what they use the heat signature. I don't know if it's a principal thing to measure, but the possibility of earthquakes and volcanoes, especially volcanoes. So from what was explained to me, this particular heat signature scale was that at 80 degrees Celsius is like really hot maximum, and that's at 80 degrees Celsius heat signature would suggest that you're standing on top of a very volatile volcano. It's gonna it's gonna blow any time. So it's not, when I say heat signature, it's not the temperature of the soil or the earth. It's a different kind of measurement, and it's an average 300 meters below the surface. And the heat signature in the main stone circle was like, if I recall off the top of my head, 28 degrees. And then you literally just take this, this big satellite dish, and you're measuring 28 degrees, and you move it over there to that stone circle with the double walls, and it shoots up to 58 degrees. 58 degrees. So it's like something strange is going on there. So instantly we knew that something special and unique was happening there. The only place that we measured the higher heat signature than that particular stone circle, the only other place is at Adam's calendar. At Adam's, we basically measured 78 and 80 degrees. So it's telling us that Adam's calendar is about to blow. It's like on a volcano. It's going to blow anytime, and yet it's not. So it's telling us that the stone circles and the Adam's calendar itself are generating the energy that we are measuring. It's not the stuff that we measure underground. It's really important.
Well, I asked them, so, can you say more about the kinds of chemicals or the, dangerous thing? I mean, were there mistakes? Were there accidents? Did things leak? And they said, yes, it's a lab. Yes, things spilled, things leaked. Yes, there were things that went wrong. We had mistakes. We had accidents. Yes. And so I thought, okay, fine. And they said one of the liquids that they were creating there was the liquid that melted stone that was used in the mining operations. So I just found this after our last chat. I found these notes where they said that they had this liquid that would melt the stone, and the idea was to melt the stone and leave the gold behind. So I thought, well, now that's interesting. And the fact that they would use that to create the mining tunnels, but they would leave and go away. And then when they came back, the tunnel would be all dried and it would be fine.
Wow. Okay. I don't think you've ever brought this up before, because I mean, there's so much written material, so much detail in those Vision Quest notes of yours. It's mind blowing. That's why I'm so happy that we're doing this, so you can go through it and remind me and share this with our viewers and the people tuning in with us. But you told me that you're making a special focused documentary on just the Vision Quest notes. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
So at some stage we'll be releasing that to our respective channels, that's going to be awesome. That's like the main feature for me.
Yeah.
That's the main, because I've been talking shite over the years. Now I want to hear from somebody else.
Right. My turn. Yeah. The other circle, the other large circle was the animal and human DNA circle. And I think, we mentioned this in one of our other chats, that they never referred to us as humans. We were always called the creature. And this is where they modified the creature. So they took me on a kind of a very quick tour through those labs. And there was a circle that was, again, the circles that are there are how they were left. It was the last time that lab was used. This was a lab where we were working on the eye. So that was one that I absolutely remember. And they explained how difficult the eye was. And it required constant manipulation and constant changes to the eye to get the eye to work. Because again, you wanted, for the mining purposes, you wanted short focus, darkness. But then in the rest of, when they came out of the tunnels, you needed distance and daylight. So there was all these things about trying to get the eye to refocus, the iris to open, and the pupil to dilate and fold. So they're explaining how delicate the eye was to work on. And so that was one lab for that. There was another lab that was kidneys. There was another lab that was lungs. And they were explaining all the different things that they were discovering with the creature at that point that was having difficulty. So they were talking about the lungs. And they said that the lungs were fine because if you were just in the air, it was perfectly fine. But if you're underground, then the lung has to filter. So they said we had to modify the lung significantly to be able to filter out particles. So yeah. I said that was a huge difference. They said, you have filtering lungs. That's very rare to have filtering lungs.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I remember one of the other circles there was also for the intestine, if I recall, for the stomach, the digestive system. And I need to go back and spend time in that circle for the eye because my eyesight is seriously deteriorating rapidly.
Yeah.
So thanks for reminding me. I need to go up the mountain once a week or as often as I can and spend 2 hours in there and just see how it'll help to fix my eyesight.
Sunlight, water, frequency.
Right. Sunlight,
and they also explained that in the sunlight, there are different lights in the whole spectrum of sunlight. And they said, but the beautiful thing about the sun that we have is that it has it all. So they said it doesn't matter that you've got other bits. The beauty of this particular, where we are, the distance we are from our particular sun, and the fact that we only have one means that it's really easy to focus and work with sunlight.
That's really interesting and critical information for people that are trying to process all this stuff. It's just, what this information does is just amplify and deepen the knowledge that how little we know and how much there is to find out. That just blows my mind. And every time you spend time in the company of someone who's done research in a specific direction, you realize how little we know and how completely and utterly flawed our education system is, how narrow it is by putting boundaries into the box of different subjects and not allowing children at a young age to realize how all this information is interconnected, how all this information crosses from this field of information, whether it's science or physics or chemistry, into geology, into metallurgy, into organic chemistry, into molecular biology, into the creation of physical form, into sound, frequency, light, how everything is connected. And the moment we start separating these bits of information and knowledge, we literally create little zombies or people with very limited threshold for knowledge of limited information. And this is why I often think of like the great philosophers of ancient times, Plato and that whole group of individuals. If you listen to what they wrote and what they spoke about and what they wrote about, their knowledge was complete knowledge and information. They were able to talk about the stars and astronomy and the planets and soil and chemistry and spirituality and physical form and sacred geometry and all these things. How come they were able to talk about all these things? And they were known as philosophers. I would call them scientists. I would call them very advanced scientists of the past, not philosophers. And so today we call it philosophy. No. And what we study as philosophy today in our schools and universities is such garbage compared to what these philosophers were studying in ancient times, because our philosophy and our science, our philosophy doesn't really go into creation, into genetics, into the quantum field. Our philosophy deals with the bullshit that surrounds us often. And I'm disrespectful to philosophers, because there are some really great people and great minds in philosophy. But I do believe that the philosophers of the ancient times, the Greeks and probably beyond them, their knowledge was so much broader, and this is why they could philosophize about things from a scientific perspective rather than a philosophical and ideological perspective.
Well, one of the things that happened to me over the years is the site whispering that I love the most, and the places that I am drawn to, I keep finding these schools, mystery schools, learning schools, ancient, academies. So, I'll be at Chaco Canyon and I'll find the school. I'll be at, in the Orkneys and I'll find the school. So it seems to be.
So hold on. When you say you find the school, you're talking about the ancient school. So
yeah.
Your shamanic self talking to the teachers of the past. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah. So it seems that I continually find those. And when you find them and you find some of the teachers, professors, whatever you want to call them, of these mystery schools, they're saying that students come there to grapple with the big questions. Who are we? How did we get here? What is it all made of? How do we work with it? So, they're not asking they're not asking for their times tables or the periodic table. There's nothing that goes down in narrow. It's all very big questions. And it was so beautiful when it was in Bandelier with Matthew, and we climbed up to this cave, and the cave was one of these schools. And the guardians up there said that we'll never tell you the answers, because that's our answer. That's the answer we found to make sense of the wholeness. You have to find the answer that makes sense for your sense of the wholeness, because together we each get a piece of the puzzle. And the puzzle is so great. And your way in is different than my way in. But if we share our ways, then we have a beautiful wholeness that would never have come if I tell you my truth and you just go with that. Then we only have one way. And I thought that was so beautiful.
That is fantastic. I love that. That's really awesome. And I guess there are many people that say that, I'll share my truth with you and see how that resonates with you. There are people that do behave in that way. And I find that really admirable, that I don't always behave like that. But I need to wisen up and start behaving more like that. But I guess I have embraced that philosophy. I do like to learn what other people tell me. Sometimes I talk to scientists and researchers and scholars of certain areas and certain areas of research that I haven't really been exposed to. And the moment they start talking to me, I just go, oh my God, no, that goes against everything that I know or believe in. And I have to literally stop myself and say, stop, Tellinger, listen, pay attention, listen and learn from what this person is sharing with you. It might sound like absolute hogwash to you now, but somewhere in there is a golden thread of information that you'll find that will connect to what you currently know, what you hold sacred, what you think is sacrosanct, what you think is the most important information in the world. And suddenly you realize that the information that I have isn't that complete or that whole, and this is what happens when you go, especially to places like, Contact in the Desert or the many different events that I've spoken at around the world, and you meet these amazing minds, and from astrophysicists to material scientists to spiritual healers and channelers and shamans like yourself, and they start sharing their knowledge with you. You go, okay, hold on, let me just get rid of everything I know. Pay attention here. Let me absorb what they're sharing with me, because at some stage you hit that little button and you go, I can see the connection, bing. And the moment you find it, it's like finding a wormhole into their universe. It's finding the entrance point into their knowledge pool. And then suddenly it just goes, and it merges with what they've shared with you, where 10 minutes prior to that, you were just thinking, no, I don't get any of this. This doesn't make any sense to me. And that's just for me personally, that's one of the great journeys, one of the greatest experiences that I'm eternally grateful for having been given this opportunity to travel around the world and do my own talks and lectures and share what I've learned, and then find other people that share their research with me. It's been a fantastic journey. And you are one of those people that came into my life and shared your knowledge and information, and here we are, filling people's heads with all kinds of crap that'll freak them out for the rest of their lives. And
yep. Well, we use the medicine wheel as a learning paradigm, and someone that's on the complete opposite side of the wheel from me, I'm not going to understand them. I'm not going to see the world the way they see it. And when I start talking from my side of the wheel, they're looking at me going, "What?" That's okay. So we can come to the middle. We can share. I can come around to their side. They can come around to my side. It's all there.
I just remember one of the bits of information that came out of the channelings and the shamanic conversations with these spirit guides and the guardians of these sites and these genetic engineers that were busy working there and medical people that you've connected with. I recall one of the stories was that they had they were experimenting with all kinds of humans. So let's come back to the fact that we're talking about, we call it the welcome circle, right? So at the welcome circle, there were these two labs, and one of those for plant DNA and one was for animal and human DNA. Now, when they started creating animal species, it's also very clear that much of what we see on Earth today was created in these labs and then released into the world, whether it was the grasses, the trees, the plants, and then the insects and the creatures and the animals that go along that often pollinate the plant and so forth. And this is how we can see how a plant has only one species that pollinates it. So, you can ask yourself, well, how did those two evolve independently only to then find each other? That's impossible. So they're clearly somewhere along the line, they were being created at the same time so that they can actually coexist and live and keep to multiply. But where I'm going with this is that at one stage they were creating beings that looked more like blades of grass. Do you recall something like that? They didn't have a backbone. They were too floppy, and they were like experimenting with animal creatures, but they were more like. And they just did.
In Botswana.
Was that in Botswana? And these creatures they couldn't survive. They just couldn't hack it. Their physical form was just wrong. These animal creatures, and they were more like weird blades of grass or plants that just didn't make it. Can you imagine running into an animal kind of being that is like that? It's just, and in fact, that is quite frankly where I believe the origins of the island of Dr. Moreau comes from this kind of ancient genetic manipulation. I'm handing it over to you.
Well, so that's sidebar. Never mind. Here we go. So when we were in Botswana, there was that guardian.
Sodila Hills. Are you referring to Sodila Hills? Yeah. That's by the way, Sodila Hills is the mountain of the gods. That's what it's known as. The mountain of the gods. Okay. In case you're wondering, we come back to the gods once again, as always.
Yep. So the interesting part was that we met a guardian. Dean took us up and there was this incredible sort of ape face carved into the rock. I mean, even with the teeth, there were all this vein of quartz that formed the teeth, and the eye, and the sun, that the setting sun came through the eye and everyone. It was amazing. So I tuned into this guardian and said, "What's the deal?" The guardian, because it was Kunte that explained that this is the guardian of this land, and that they're positioned as guardians. So I said, "What's the guardian part of your job?" And they said, "Well, there was this time when there was this incredibly rogue Anunnaki geneticist woman, female geneticist, who ran away, went to Sodilo Hills because it was more of an island at that time. The sea was around it, and it jutted up, and it was this little contained island, and she was just inventing anything. She was mixing everything. She was inventing all kinds of creatures and bizarre shit, and she had run rogue. And that when I was talking to one of the Anunnakis back in South Africa, and they were explaining that they were a particular expedition, part of their job in coming at this particular time was they had to go get her. They had to find her, rein her in, and get rid of all of these failures. They had to extinguish all these experiments, and that was the floppy, trying to mix the human with the plant. Yeah. And so that was a whole nother nightmare.
So that's actually that's consistent with some of the Sumerian texts that you read about. These rogue Anunnaki, they were doing these things in remote places, just going off, doing their own experiments and creating their own creatures and stuff. Yeah. And I guess that's why I bring it back to the island of Dr. Moreau, just cross-pollinating creatures, humanoids with lions and cows and so forth. And this is where I believe the imagery of the centaur comes from, half horse, half man, because they did it. Yep. They actually did this. They cloned these, crossbred these species with humans or humanoids. They may not have always been humans, but they may have been other humanoid beings that are extinct at this stage. And that's just horrific when you start seeing they were just playing games.
Yep. Well, they explained to me
all a big game.
When they were talking me through what was happening in the human side, the animal DNA circle, they were saying our particular skill as genetic engineers is that we could pull something apart and we could put it together with something else. We didn't have to make them. We didn't try. They said, you're trying to modify something, repeatedly modify it until it's changed. We would just take it apart and put the pieces back together. We didn't have to slowly
see what happens.
Yeah. So they said, we didn't have to go through the same process that your genetic engineers go through. We didn't have to make a small adjustment. They could make whole as bolus huge things.
So one of the things that I just remember now as well is I think we got about 5 minutes left in the session. So I want to just bring you back to Sodila Hills again and the Mountain of the Gods. Now, it's just a spectacular site, as you know. I've been there a few times now, and it just always takes your breath away. By the way, that's where the Serpent Cave is, the Serpent Cave that is sacred to the Bushmen of the area. And we are very blessed to have Kuntai, one of the remaining original Bushmen whose family lived there for thousands of years, probably on top of Sodila Hills, on top of that mountain for thousands of years. And then when UNESCO came in the last 20 years or so, they removed all these ancient indigenous tribes, including Kuntai's family. They removed them from their ancestral lands. So, when you hear me talk about UNESCO and how unhappy I am with them and how little respect I have for them, understand that UNESCO is not a noble organization. UNESCO has been set up by the United Nations to go and take control and lock down of these sacred sites around the world, so they can take control of these very powerful ancient sites that could cause problem for them in the future, remove the ancestral people, remove the indigenous people that live there, and take control of these ancient sites that are, most of them, if not all of them, are very powerful energetic sites, have a very important ancient history. And this is the crime that UNESCO is committing around the world, and people don't know it. They get all excited. Oh, we've been declared a UNESCO site. That is the worst thing that could happen to any ancient site on Earth. And then UNESCO has more authority than your government. Keep this in mind. Once UNESCO takes control of your site, your people of your country and your government loses control of that site. The control of that site now belongs to UNESCO and the United Nations. This is despicable. This should never happen anywhere on Earth. And this is how they've invaded all our countries, and they go and find out all these important places. Since UNESCO took control of Sodila Hills, it's a bloody mess. It's a mess of unbelievable proportion. And this is in Botswana. So with our Stone Circles, Adam's calendar, we don't want UNESCO anywhere near these places. We will not go into any kind of relationship with them. We will create our own South African protective organization that will prevent anyone from ever destroying it, and just do more research, more discovery, and sharing that with the people of the world. But what I wanted to ask you, John Paul, since we on that, and the fact that this island of Dr. Moreau, island of Dr. Anunnaki, whatever her name was, because it was an island. The Mountain of the Gods was an island. It was surrounded by water. That's no longer the case, but that's what it was. So it is consistent with the island of Dr. Moreau. And Credo Mutwa told me, actually, one of the first, I can't remember the first or the second I met with Credo, he told me to go to Tsadila Hills and do some research there and experiment. And he told me about the fact that they were cloning creatures there, that the Anunnaki were there doing all these experiments with these different creatures. Credo Mutwa told me this story. So when you told me, without knowing this, that with the your spirit guardian there told you what was happening there, I just remember Credo Mutwa telling me the story, and I went, okay, well, you can't make this up. So clearly we have scientific evidence, statistical probability proof that this is the case. But then you said something really important. You said that for something like 50,000 years, I can't remember if it was 50,000 or 5,000 or 80,000, it was a long period of time that the Bushmen of the area were brought in, because they weren't there when this was happening.
Right.
But the Bushmen of that area were brought in, and that's how the original Bushman tribes ended up on Tsadila Hills, the mountain of the gods, to cleanse that dark, disturbing energy that was left behind by all the fossils and bone remains of all these creatures that were created and cloned there. And the Bushmen had to start this fire that apparently they looked after for thousands of years to cleanse that mountain. Do you recall that? And
Yep. No, that was the Guardian saying that they called for the cleansing, and they did whatever they could do, but they're stuck in mineral form. So the earth, they said the earth cried, and the Bushmen heard the cry of the earth and came and started cleaning to make the earth happy again. And once they had done this, and it was lots of burning. Once they had done this, then the fertility of the earth came up again. So remember when we went to that place that was just this incredibly strong female fertility place? It was all the way down this. It was like a, it was like a vagina on the side of the mountain. It was. So the Guardian said that once it was complete, that came back to life, and that the whole area then became as fertile as it is now. But yes, there was the earth crying, and the Bushmen came and honored the cry of the earth, was the story.
Well, John Paul, thank you so much for bringing these memories and for these chats. I think we've come to the end of this session.
Yep.
Let's remember where we are and pick up from there. I don't think we're going to pick up anyway. We'll just carry on with going down any channel that our discussion takes us, and maybe that's probably not a bad thing, so we don't get stuck.
It's been good, because I've got all of these. The thing that I do, because the sight whispering is channeling, and I don't remember, right? I'm just the channel. So unless there are people with me that can ask lots of questions and we rely on their memory, I tend to record whatever they say. And then I send those recordings to get transcribed, and then they just pile up and pile up and pile up. So the Africa transcripts, and it's so funny when you open some of them, there's just 2 paragraphs, and you open others and there's pages of stuff. So it's been really good to be able to go back and look at some of this stuff again. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, John Paul, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone tuning in. Look forward to our next chapter in breaking down spiritual archaeology and spiritual history, and a deeper spiritual look into the ancient past and the origins of humankind, and the deep mysteries that we are uncovering and finding more juicy stuff every time we go down this channel.
Cool.
So until later, bye for now.
Bye.